The M4 Max MacBook Pro came out last Friday alongside a new Mac Mini and a new M4 iMac. And I've spent the last few days working on this new machine. So I wanted to briefly share with you my opinions on the new MacBook, as well as run a few stress tests to see how things have improved from last year, if they've improved at all. So what's new on this year's MacBook Pro? Well, not a whole lot on the outside. Everything kind of comes from within and the new M4 lineup of chips. So my machine's configuration goes a little something like this. We have the M4 Max chip with a 16-core CPU and a 40-core GPU. There's 48 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of SSD storage. So there's technically one cosmetic difference this year, and that's if you get the Nano texture display option. And I immediately regret my decision of not getting that one. I'm not entirely sure why I didn't go with it. I do like it on the iPad Pro, especially when traveling, and this is kind of my main machine for traveling. But then I often find myself kind of flip-flopping that because I go to the M4 iPad Pro without it, and I'm like, wow, this looks a lot sharper and brighter. And so I wanted that sharpness on my Mac at all times over the anti-reflective coating, but then I saw it in an Apple store and I thought, this looks really good, and there wasn't a lot of reflections, and that's a pretty reflective environment, and so, I don't know, I'm having second thoughts. Oh well, I guess it's just an option if you want it, and I made the incorrect choice. Obviously, you can get the machine in a 14 or 16-inch size this year, just like last year, and you can get it in silver and space black. So this year, I went from a 16-inch space black down to a 14-inch in silver. I mostly wanted to switch things up, but also I really missed the 14-inch size. For me, making this my main travel machine is by far the best form factor for traveling. The 16-inch was just way too big for me, especially on those tiny tray tables. Now the display is a little bit better in terms of brightness. We go up from 600 on the M3 model for SDR content up to 1000, and you're still at 1600 for HDR content. So when I crank the brightness up on both machines, the M4 and the M3 Max, I can tell on the M4 that it is a bit brighter, but I'm not sure it's going to reflect on video. Now all of the connectivity and I/O is the same this year. You still have MagSafe, 3 USB-C ports, 3.5mm headphone jack, SD card slot, and HDMI, but the 3 Thunderbolt ports this year are Thunderbolt 5, as opposed to last year and the year before, I think, was Thunderbolt 4. You really can't tell a difference, obviously, by looking at them, but you can now connect 3 external 6K monitors if you want. If you have a Thunderbolt 5 drive, you get about 120 gigabits per second in transfer speeds. I unfortunately don't have 3 6K displays or a Thunderbolt 5 anything, and so whenever I do get those accessories, whether it be a dock or a drive or whatever the case may be, I'll be sure to test it. But yeah, there's an improvement there with the Thunderbolt ports. Now the M3 Max machine that I had last year here is almost spec for spec in terms of the configuration, so no major differences at all with the CPU, GPU cores, and RAM. I did run standard benchmarks as well as a few real-world stress tests for things that are in my day-to-day workflow. So let's start with the arbitrary numbers. We have Geekbench scores. You've probably already seen this, so you can skip it if you want to, but we got about 3,000 for single and almost 21,000 for multi-core on the M3 Max. 3,600 for single and 25,000 for multi on the M4 Max. For OpenCL and Metal, we have 98,000 and 163,000 for the M3 and 119,000 and nearly 192,000 for the M4 Max. Now these numbers are approximate. Didn't want to give you the full exact number, but you can read them on screen here. This is exactly what the scores were, so pause it and read it if you need to. But obviously the M4 Max has a small increase in single core and a minor increase in multi-core, but the GPU power here seems to be quite substantial from these scores when it goes from the M3 up to the M4. So I decided to put that to the test here. We did a couple of real-world tests, and I also did one more benchmark. I've actually never used this benchmark before, but I wanted to give it a shot. I always use the Blackmagic disk speed for the SSD, but there was also the Blackmagic RAW test, where it basically stress test 8K 12:1 compression Blackmagic RAW video. And so I got 90 frames per second for the 8K CPU benchmark and 377 frames in 8K Metal on the M4 Max. Now on the M3 Max, we had an 80 frames per second score on the 8K CPU and 297 8K Metal. So again, some improvement here for the M4 Max. I don't really know what that all means in terms of real world. So let's go right to the real world test here. Now, when it comes to video, I tried out something different, and I've actually been using this recently, been demoing it. I took an 8-second clip in Topaz Labs AI video app where I ran the 4x slow motion preset on a clip that was not in slow motion at all. It was a regular 24 frames per second clip, and it just generates frames using AI that aren't there. And it's pretty wild, and I highly recommend giving it a shot. It's like $300 for the entire software, but you can try it for free if you want to. And so the M4 Max finished in 4 minutes and 48 seconds, and the M3 Max finished in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. So the old adage here that time is money is really on display here if you're somebody who uses these AI video tools quite a bit. And this is just from 1 year ago to now in terms of the chip improvement when it comes from the M3 Max to the M4 Max, which is crazy. You're almost saving 2 minutes here. I also wanted to stress that this was the only test that kicked on the fans and immediately on both machines, and they were on and going pretty loud here. The fans don't come on often for me when I'm, obviously editing and doing other things, but for this, it almost is a guarantee that you're going to hear those fans. Now, as for my normal day-to-day workflow of a Final Cut Pro timeline export, this is a relatively, moderate video. I had a 6 minute and 30-second timeline in 4K with tons of effects, plugins, custom LUTs. I even used motion VFX like Roto AI masks to get some things out of there, mask them up, and that can get pretty intense. And the M3 Max finished in 1 minute and 17 seconds, while the M4 Max finished in 1 minute and 7 seconds. So it's still an improvement, but definitely not anything crazy drastic. 10 seconds is still impressive, and it does all add up, but I'm not sure that's a reason to go out and upgrade your machine. In fact, this video is not meant for those who have an M3 Max to go out and upgrade to an M4 Max. It was just the machine that I had with very similar specs, and it's been a year, and I wanted to see what that improvement was. You're definitely fine to keep going on an M3 for another 3 years or so before you even start thinking of upgrading. But for those who have a Pro chip looking to get up to a Max, maybe an M2 Pro, or an M1 Pro, or even an M1 Max, for those people out there, I remember looking back at an old video where I was doing the same types of exports on an M1 Max, and it was nearly 4 times longer than the M4 Max. You're looking at nearly 4 to 5 minutes, where I just said that the other one finished in about 1 minute and 7 seconds. And so that's a pretty big jump from 2020 to 2024 now. And if you're somebody out there who has that machine and you have one of the first Apple Silicon Pro or Max machines and you're thinking about upgrading, I think you're going to be really happy with the M4 Max or even the M4 Pro lineup of chips. But of course, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. What do you think? Did you pick up a new machine, or are you thinking about it? What do you do for work, or what are you using the machines for? Would love to hear that in the comments down below. This is Dan with MacRumors. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you around in the next video.